Clara was tidying her small sunlit room, the golden afternoon light streaming through the curtains and warming the wooden floor as she moved from one side to the other, carefully folding clothes and arranging her books in neat piles, humming softly to herself as the quiet hum of the house surrounded her, feeling a rare sense of peace after a hectic morning full of errands and the constant noise of family life, a brief pocket of solitude that she cherished because moments like these were rare. Moments when she could be fully herself without interruptions, and as she reached for a scarf lying across the chair, her mind wandered to thoughts of her new life, the adjustments she had to make, the delicate balance between being a stepmother to Tom, her stepson, and maintaining her own sense of independence, thinking about how Tom had seemed distant at first, shy and unsure around her, but slowly over the months he had grown more comfortable, and she had noticed little things, small gestures that made her heart tighten unexpectedly, the way he laughed softly when she told a joke, the way he lingered just a moment too long when talking about school or music, and though she told herself these were harmless, everyday moments of connection, she could not deny a strange fluttering in her chest whenever he looked at her in that particular way, a look that seemed both curious and hesitant, searching and unsure, and as she folded the last piece of clothing, she heard the faint creak of the door, and her heart jumped, a sudden surge of adrenaline that made her stop mid-motion, and she turned slightly, assuming it was Tom, but the hesitation in the movement, the almost invisible pause before a soft voice said, Sorry, I didn't know you were here," made her pause, sensing immediately that this encounter was different, charged with an intensity that startled her, making her palms a little sweaty and her pulse quicken, and she realized with a shock that Tom had walked in at the exact moment she had been adjusting her outfit, and though she had been covered and nothing was inappropriate, the timing was so precise that the world seemed to pause for a heartbeat, the sun outside casting long streaks of light that seemed to stretch and hold the moment in suspension, and she found herself frozen, unsure whether to speak or simply stay still, and Tom, standing awkwardly by the door, his hands in front of him, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes averted, cheeks flushed in a way that mirrored her own startled reaction, seemed just as caught off guard, caught between apology and uncertainty, and a silence filled the room, thick and heavy with unspoken tension, a silence that neither wanted to break too quickly for fear of shattering the fragile, strange connection that had suddenly emerged, the space between them charged with a mixture of embarrassment, curiosity, and something more subtle, something neither of them fully understood but both felt, a quiet awareness that this accidental encounter had opened a door to emotions neither had anticipated, and Clara, her voice gentle but slightly trembling, finally said, "It's okay," a small phrase meant to soothe but also acknowledging the delicate nature of the moment. And Tom exhaled softly, relief mixed with a flicker of something else in his eyes, and for a moment they both simply stared at each other, the ordinary room around them fading into the background as if the sunlight itself had drawn a spotlight on this singular, unplanned encounter, and Clara noticed the way Tom's hands twitched nervously, how he shifted from one foot to the other, and how his gaze, even when lowered, seemed to search for hers as if silently asking for reassurance, a quiet plea that she instinctively understood, and she motioned slightly to the bed, a subtle invitation to sit, wanting to ease the tension and give them both a moment to gather themselves, and Tom hesitated, his eyes meeting hers briefly before lowering again, then slowly, almost reluctantly, he moved toward the bed and sat at the edge, hands clasped together in his lap, body tense yet visibly trying to relax, and Clara, standing a few steps away, felt a mixture of emotions she hadn't expected, protectiveness, curiosity, an unspoken connection, a sense of intimacy that was emotional rather than physical, a closeness born from shared vulnerability in this surprising, delicate moment, and the sunlight shifted again, casting a warm glow on Tom's face, highlighting the subtle expressions of confusion, embarrassment, and something deeper. A yearning perhaps, a need to understand the bond forming between them, and Clara, feeling the weight of the moment, finally allowed herself to breathe, letting the initial shock ebb away, and she sat on the edge of the bed, not too close, giving him space, yet close enough that their presence in the small room felt significant, as if the world outside had melted away, leaving only the two of them suspended in this unplanned, emotional encounter, and they both laughed softly, a gentle, nervous sound that seemed to release some of the tension, though it only hinted at the depth of feelings neither dared to name aloud, and as the laughter faded, a silence returned, softer this time, filled with the promise of understanding, a moment that seemed to stretch, each second heavy with the possibility of discovery, of emotions finally surfacing, and Tom spoke quietly, almost a whisper, sometimes. I feel like I don't really know you, even though you're my family now, and Clara felt a pang in her chest, recognizing the honesty, the raw vulnerability in his words, the unspoken longing for connection that mirrored her own feelings she had carefully hidden beneath layers of composure and routine, and she reached out instinctively, resting a hand briefly near his arm, a gesture of comfort and acknowledgement, and he looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time fully, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them, a bridge forming in the space that had once felt uncertain and awkward, and in that instant, Clara understood that this accidental entry, this moment of surprise and vulnerability, had opened a door neither of them had expected, a door that could lead to understanding, emotional closeness, and the quiet, complicated stirrings of a bond that went beyond simple family ties, and as they sat there together, the sunlight slowly fading into the warm hues of late afternoon, both Clara and Tom felt a mix of relief, curiosity, and a subtle thrill of emotions they couldn't yet name, a mixture of connection and longing that promised more, something deeper, something fragile yet undeniably real, and the room seemed to hum softly around them, as if the universe itself had paused to witness the moment, and Clara, heart racing yet calm in a strange way, finally allowed herself to whisper, "It's okay, really," and Tom exhaled, a small smile breaking through his nervous expression, and for the first time since moving in, Clara felt that invisible line between them had shifted, a new chapter quietly beginning, filled with tension, understanding, and a promise of emotions neither had fully explored but both now sensed, delicate, powerful, and quietly transformative. After that unexpected encounter, the days that followed felt charged with a quiet tension neither Clara nor Tom could fully explain, and every glance between them seemed to carry a weight that was both thrilling and unnerving, as though the air itself had thickened with unspoken emotions. Clara went about her routine, folding clothes, arranging books, and preparing meals, but every small noise in the house made her pause, wondering if Tom was nearby, whether he would enter her space again by accident or intention, and she found herself thinking of him in moments she had once considered private, noticing how he moved through the house, the soft sound of his footsteps, the way he hummed quietly to himself when he believed no one was listening, and she realized with a start that she had grown attuned to his presence in a way that made her heart tighten unexpectedly. Tom, meanwhile, felt a similar pull, his thoughts returning again and again to the brief conversation they had shared, replaying her gentle words, the calm in her voice, the warmth in her expression, and he noticed how much he longed to sit near her, to talk with her, to bridge the gap that had always existed between them as family members trying to understand one another, and yet, each time he approached, a hesitance stopped him, a fear of crossing boundaries, of making things uncomfortable, and so he lingered at the edges, speaking softly, staying just within the limits that felt safe, yet longing for more connection, more understanding, more moments where he could be close to her without the weight of uncertainty. One evening, Clara was sitting in the living room, a book open in her lap, sunlight fading into twilight outside, and Tom wandered in quietly, standing for a moment near the doorway before speaking. "Can I sit with you for a while?" And she looked up, a faint smile crossing her lips, nodding as he moved to the sofa beside her, the air between them filled with a mix of anticipation, relief, and something gentler, something unspoken that neither dared to name aloud, and as they sat side by side, each pretending casual ease, Clara noticed the subtle shifts in his posture, the way his hands rested lightly on his knees, the nervous glance he cast toward her face, the faint tension in his shoulders, and she understood instinctively that he was as conflicted as she was, both drawn to one another in ways that were confusing yet undeniably real. They began to talk, first about small, everyday things, schoolwork, plans for the weekend, a shared interest in movies, music, and books. But slowly the conversation deepened, moving to personal thoughts, feelings, memories of childhood, moments of regret and joy, the quiet vulnerabilities that people rarely shared even with close friends, and Clara found herself listening intently, her heart swelling with empathy, admiration, and something tender she hadn't expected, realizing that the bond they were forming was more than mere family obligation, more than politeness or habit. it was a connection of hearts that recognized itself. Even if both were hesitant to fully admit it, Tom, in turn, was surprised by how natural it felt to speak with her in this way, how comforting her presence was, how her voice seemed to calm the storm of thoughts in his mind, and he noticed how his usual confidence gave way to a gentle vulnerability, a willingness to be seen without pretense, to admit doubts, insecurities, and hopes he had never voiced to anyone else, and he felt a flutter of gratitude, admiration, and something tender that made his chest ache with a sweet ache he couldn't name, the kind of feeling that both thrilled and terrified him at the same time. As the evening wore on, the sunlight fully faded and the room was bathed in soft, warm lamplight, and they continued talking. Laughter breaking the tension from time to time, the kind of shared laughter that carried warmth and intimacy, but beneath it lay the undercurrent of emotions neither wanted to confront fully, emotions of longing, curiosity, and an almost magnetic attraction that was emotional rather than physical, a pull of hearts and minds seeking understanding, connection, and comfort, and Clara felt herself leaning slightly closer, without realizing, as she listened to his stories, the cadence of his voice, the way his eyes lit up when he described a memory or a dream, and Tom, in turn, felt drawn to her in a way that made him both nervous and exhilarated, the magnetic pull of something undefined but profoundly moving. They spoke of family, of loss, of the small moments that shaped them, and each revelation, each admission of fear, hope, or longing made the invisible thread between them grow stronger, weaving them together in a tapestry of shared understanding and quiet emotional intimacy, and yet both were aware of the fragile line they walked, a line defined by social norms, by family ties, by the delicate balance between closeness and propriety, and that awareness made every glance, every soft smile, every casual touch feel electric, charged with an intensity neither wanted to disrupt. As the night deepened, Clara reached for a cup of tea and offered one to Tom, and when their hands brushed as she passed it to him, both felt a jolt of warmth, a small, quiet shock that made their hearts skip a beat, and they both laughed softly, pretending it was nothing, but the sensation lingered, a reminder that the emotional bond they were building had layers, depth, and complexity, that it was not just about comfort or conversation, but about an undeniable, emotional closeness that neither could fully articulate yet both felt deeply. In that quiet space, with the soft hum of the heater, the distant sounds of the neighborhood outside, and the lamplight casting gentle shadows across the room, Clara and Tom sat together, talking and laughing, sharing stories and quiet moments of reflection, each aware that their feelings were more complicated than simple affection, more profound than mere familial duty, yet safe, tender, and emotionally intimate. And as they finally rose to prepare for bed, a lingering glance, a soft smile, and a subtle shift in the room's energy told them both that this connection was only beginning, that the emotional turn triggered by that accidental encounter was evolving into something meaningful, gentle, and deeply human, a bond that promised shared understanding, trust, and perhaps a quiet, slow-burning affection that would continue to grow in the days and weeks to come, leaving both Clara and Tom thinking, dreaming, and wondering how this unexpected emotional closeness would shape their lives and hearts. And as Clara turned off the light and left the room, Tom remained for a moment, staring at the soft glow of the lamp, his mind swirling with feelings he couldn't yet name, a mixture of longing, admiration, gratitude, and the thrilling uncertainty of a bond forming between two hearts that had met unexpectedly but would not be easily forgotten. And as the house settled into silence for the night, both carried the warmth of connection with them, hearts beating with the quiet excitement of emotions unspoken, a delicate, tender, and deeply human pull that promised more. And as they drifted into sleep, thoughts of each other lingered, the memory of shared conversation and subtle glances weaving a tapestry of emotional intimacy that neither could ignore, leaving both eager for the next encounter and aware that the emotional turn of their relationship, triggered by a simple accidental entrance into a room, had set their hearts on a new, unpredictable, yet profoundly moving path that neither could have anticipated, a path filled with emotional depth, tenderness, and the quiet magic of two souls slowly discovering a connection beyond the ordinary, fragile yet beautiful, delicate yet powerful, shaping the way they would see and feel about each other in ways that would continue to evolve in the coming days. Days had passed since that quiet evening on the porch, and both Clara and Tom felt the subtle shift in their relationship, an invisible tension that was gentle but persistent, threading itself through their interactions in ways neither could ignore, and it was in these ordinary moments, the shared breakfast in the morning light, the soft laughter over small household mishaps, the exchange of glances while reading in separate rooms, that the emotional bond between them grew stronger, a connection fueled by curiosity, admiration, and a delicate longing neither had fully named but both could feel, a slow pull that was emotional first and foremost, tinged with the thrill of understanding someone on a depth that surprised them both, and Clara noticed that she thought of Tom in small ways throughout the day, wondering how he was feeling, recalling the softness in his voice, the careful attention in his eyes, the moments when he seemed hesitant yet drawn toward her, and she felt a strange warmth, a fluttering in her chest, a gentle awareness that he had become more than just a stepson, more than a family member. He had become a presence she wanted nearby, a quiet anchor in the swirl of her thoughts, and Tom, on his part, felt a similar tug, an irresistible curiosity about her world, her feelings, her thoughts, and he noticed how often he lingered in doorways, paused to listen to her laughter, or caught himself staring a moment too long when she moved through the kitchen or adjusted a book on the shelf, and though both tried to act normal, to maintain the routines of everyday life, the awareness of their emotional closeness colored every moment with a quiet intensity, a thrill and a vulnerability that neither had experienced before, a mixture of comfort and nervous anticipation that made their hearts beat a little faster in the presence of each other. One afternoon, Clara was arranging flowers on the table when Tom walked in quietly, carrying a book he had promised to lend her. And she looked up with a soft smile, surprised by his timing yet pleased, and he hesitated, shifting from foot to foot, his hands awkwardly holding the book between them, and she noticed the faint blush on his cheeks, the nervous energy that seemed to radiate from him in subtle waves, and she felt a pull in her chest, a mixture of empathy, fondness, and something more tender, and without thinking, she gestured for him to sit across from her at the small table, and he obeyed, their knees nearly touching under the table, a closeness that both thrilled and unnerved them, and as they spoke, the conversation began with the book, then drifted to personal stories, to dreams, to the ways they saw the world, the way they felt about life, school, work, and family. And with each passing moment, the room seemed to shrink, the world outside fading into a blur as they leaned in slightly, voices soft, laughter breaking the tension from time to time, and in those laughs, in the shared glances, in the pauses where words failed them, a profound emotional intimacy was forming, something unspoken yet undeniably real, a connection that went beyond the ordinary bounds of family or friendship, a delicate understanding of one another's hearts, fears, hopes, and quiet longings. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the wooden floor, Tom reached for the cup of tea Clara had poured, and their fingers brushed lightly, sending a small, electric warmth through both of them. A silent acknowledgement of the closeness that neither dared name aloud, and Clara, noticing the fleeting spark, felt her heart flutter, a mixture of excitement and nervousness, and she realized that her own emotions had grown bolder, more complex, more tender, as if each glance, each shared word, each quiet moment together was planting seeds of something deeper, something profoundly emotional and intimate. Tom, for his part, felt a rush of feelings he couldn't articulate, a combination of admiration, respect, curiosity, and longing, and he found himself drawn not just to her presence but to the essence of who she was, the gentle way she listened, the quiet strength she carried, the warmth that radiated from her in subtle gestures. And he knew that he wanted more of these moments, more shared conversations, more laughter, more quiet understanding, without ever stepping beyond the boundaries of propriety, without rushing what was slowly unfolding between them, and Clara sensed the same, a desire to nurture this fragile, emotional bond, to allow it to grow naturally, carefully, a connection built on trust, empathy, and mutual respect, and yet tinged with a sweetness that was almost magnetic in its pull. In the evenings, when the house was quiet and the faint hum of life outside carried through the windows, they would find themselves near one another again, sometimes in the living room, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes simply crossing paths in hallways, and in every encounter, there was a charged softness, a tension that was emotional rather than physical, a gentle awareness of each other's presence, a craving for understanding, recognition, and closeness, and this tension was never forced, never rushed, it flowed naturally, like water finding its path, and in the midst of it all, they discovered a rhythm, a silent communication through shared glances, fleeting smiles, soft laughter, and the careful exchange of words that revealed more than simple sentences could convey. One night, as Clara was preparing a small snack in the kitchen, Tom lingered by the doorway, watching her with an intensity that made her pause, and she caught his gaze, holding it for a brief moment, sensing the depth of feeling there, and she smiled softly, a mixture of warmth and recognition, a silent reassurance that the connection was mutual, that the emotions swirling between them were acknowledged, if not fully named, and Tom felt a relief, a rush of gratitude, a flutter of hope that this closeness could continue to grow without complication. And as he moved closer, casually, naturally, the air between them seemed to vibrate with a quiet anticipation, a soft excitement that was emotional, tender, and profoundly human. As the weeks continued, small gestures accumulated, the sharing of a favorite song, a comment on a book, a gentle tease, a laugh over an inside joke, moments of care and attention that, when combined, created a tapestry of emotional intimacy, an understanding that neither had to speak aloud, yet both recognized, and this emotional closeness became the anchor of their days, a source of comfort, joy, and quiet excitement, and even in the mundane moments of life, folding laundry, washing dishes, or organizing the bookshelf, they found opportunities to connect, to share, to exist together in a way that was tender, meaningful, and deeply moving, and through these interactions, they learned more about each other, about their hopes, fears, and the parts of themselves they rarely revealed to anyone else, and in doing so, they were slowly discovering a profound emotional bond, a closeness that felt like it could weather the uncertainties of life, a bond that promised understanding, companionship, and perhaps even the beginnings of something quietly romantic, an affection that was subtle, mature, and entirely based on the emotional connection they were nurturing with care, respect, and sincerity. And on one particularly quiet evening, when the sky was painted in shades of pink and lavender, Clara and Tom found themselves sitting side by side on the porch once more, the soft glow of the fading sun casting warm light on their faces, and in that moment, the words that had been unspoken between them seemed to hover in the air, delicate and fragile, the culmination of weeks of shared moments, laughter, small confessions, and subtle touches, and Tom finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. I don't know what this is, but I feel it too, whatever it is. And Clara reached out instinctively, her hand brushing his, a tender gesture filled with empathy, understanding, and recognition, and the warmth of that touch carried more meaning than any words could express, sealing a moment of emotional intimacy, a promise of connection, and the realization that this unexpected, accidental bond had transformed into something real, tender, and profoundly human, a bond that neither could ignore, that both wanted to nurture, that had the potential to grow into a quiet, deep, and meaningful relationship built on understanding, trust, and emotional closeness. And as the sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving the world bathed in soft twilight, they sat together in comfortable silence, hearts aligned in mutual recognition, aware that the emotional turn of their relationship was only beginning, that the path ahead would be filled with moments of laughter, reflection, and tender connection, and that this delicate, growing bond would continue to shape their days, hearts, and lives in ways they could only begin to imagine, a slow-burning, gentle intimacy that promised depth, meaning, and an emotional resonance that neither Clara nor Tom had expected but both now cherished profoundly. The days after that quiet evening on the porch seemed to shimmer with a subtle, almost unnoticeable energy, attention and warmth that followed Clara and Tom wherever they went in the house. And though they continued their routines, meals, chores, schoolwork, and casual conversations, the undercurrent of connection was always present, a delicate thread that tied them together in ways that neither fully understood but both felt deeply, and Clara noticed that she was more attuned than ever to his presence, sensing when he lingered nearby, when he watched her for a fleeting moment, when his voice carried an extra note of softness, and she found herself adjusting her own behavior in response, moving more deliberately, speaking more gently, laughing more openly, all because of the quiet but unmistakable bond that had formed between them, while Tom, in turn, felt a magnetic pull toward her, a desire to be near her, to speak with her, to share moments of ordinary life that suddenly felt extraordinary simply because they were shared, and he realized that he treasured these small interludes, the sound of her voice, the warmth in her expression, The gentle way she listened without judgment, the subtle acknowledgement in her eyes when he shared something personal, and each time, a flutter of emotions surged in his chest, a mixture of excitement, tenderness, admiration, and longing. Emotions that he had not fully understood before, yet now felt impossible to ignore. One afternoon, Clara was sitting by the window, a cup of tea in hand, watching the sunlight dance across the floor, when Tom entered quietly, carrying a notebook he had been using to write a story, and he hesitated at the doorway, eyes meeting hers briefly before lowering in shyness, and Clara smiled, inviting him to sit beside her, and as he settled down, the air between them was charged with a gentle, emotional intensity, a pull that was palpable yet subtle, a connection that was both safe and thrilling, and as they began to talk about the story he had written, sharing ideas, laughing softly, and trading insights, Clara felt a warmth that spread through her chest, a combination of pride, affection, and something tenderly unspoken, while Tom felt a rush of emotions mirrored in her expressions, the quiet encouragement, the soft nods, the gentle teasing, all of it building a sense of closeness that was intimate without being physical, emotional without being overbearing, a connection that made every moment feel alive and full of meaning. As the afternoon faded into evening, the sky outside painted in gentle oranges and pinks, Clara and Tom found themselves moving to the porch, bringing their tea with them, and sitting side by side, shoulders nearly touching, words flowing easily as they shared stories, hopes, fears, and memories, the kind of conversation that neither of them wanted to end because it carried a sense of understanding, comfort, and recognition that they had never experienced with anyone else, a bond that seemed to grow stronger with every exchange, every laugh, every glance, every pause that allowed silence to speak, and in that silence, they felt a closeness that transcended words, a quiet intimacy that was emotional, tender, and profoundly human. Tom finally broke the gentle hush, his voice low but steady. "Clara, I don't know how to say this, but I feel something I can't ignore, a feeling I've never felt before, and I don't know what it means, but it's real," and Clara's hand moved almost instinctively, brushing against his in a gesture of comfort, understanding, and shared emotion, a simple touch that carried more meaning than any words could, and she replied softly, "I feel it too. Whatever it is, it's real, and it matters, and we'll figure it out together," and the warmth of that acknowledgement filled the space between them, a quiet, emotional crescendo that left both hearts racing yet calm, exhilarated yet safe, a combination of feelings that was thrilling and profound, a shared recognition of the delicate, tender bond that had formed over weeks of accidental encounters, shared stories, quiet glances, and soft laughter, a connection that was emotional first, romantic gently, and deeply moving in its subtlety. As twilight gave way to night, the house settled into quiet, the distant hum of the neighborhood outside blending with the soft creak of floorboards under their feet, and Clara and Tom remained on the porch, talking and laughing, sharing dreams and confessions, the way their voices intertwined creating a rhythm of connection, a melody of emotions, a dance of hearts that neither fully understood but both cherished, and in these moments, every glance, every smile, every small brush of hands, every shared breath, felt like a thread weaving them closer together, an invisible tapestry of trust, care, understanding, and emotional intimacy, delicate yet strong, fragile yet unbreakable. Later, as Clara sipped her tea and Tom leaned back, watching her, a comfortable silence fell over them, the kind that speaks louder than words, filled with the weight and warmth of mutual recognition, and in that silence, Clara thought about how far they had come. From the accidental entrance into her room that had sparked confusion, embarrassment, and vulnerability, to this quiet evening of shared understanding, laughter, and tender connection, and she realized that what had started as a surprising moment of emotional closeness had evolved into something far deeper, a bond that promised companionship, empathy, and perhaps the gentle stirrings of romantic feelings, feelings that were subtle, mature, and entirely rooted in the emotional intimacy they had nurtured together over time. While Tom thought about how her presence had become essential to him, how the sound of her voice, the warmth in her gaze, and the soft encouragement in her words had transformed ordinary days into moments he treasured, and he knew that this connection, though complex and delicate, was real and precious, a discovery of hearts that were aligned in longing, curiosity, and affection, yet guided by care, respect, and restraint. As the night deepened, stars appearing one by one in the quiet sky above, Clara and Tom remained side by side, sharing stories of childhood memories, hopes for the future, and the small triumphs and disappointments that made life what it was, and each story, each laugh, each confession, reinforced the invisible bridge between them, a bridge of emotional trust, mutual understanding, and heartfelt recognition, and the gentle, subtle energy between them pulsed with the promise of more conversations, more shared moments, more laughter, more understanding, and perhaps, in time, a quiet, tender romance that would grow from the foundation of this emotional intimacy, unforced, natural, and profoundly moving. At one point, Clara reached out, placing her hand near his, not demanding attention, not seeking affirmation, just presence, a soft gesture of comfort and acknowledgement, and Tom, feeling the warmth, the safety, the gentle encouragement, met her gaze with a soft smile, a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and something tender, unspoken, yet understood, a silent agreement that whatever this connection was, it was real, it mattered, and it deserved care, patience, and respect, and in that moment, the world outside ceased to matter, leaving only the two of them, hearts quietly aligned. Emotions raw yet safe, and the sense that this accidental encounter, this emotional journey, had led them both to a place of understanding, intimacy, and deep, tender affection that was as thrilling as it was comforting, a bond neither could ignore, a connection neither could deny. As the night grew darker and the air cooled, Clara and Tom stood, stretching slightly, moving inside with quiet steps, still feeling the weight and warmth of the emotional closeness that had grown between them, and even in the mundane act of moving to different rooms, making final preparations for bed, the gentle hum of conversation, the soft laughter at shared memories, the occasional glance across the room, all reinforced the emotional turn that had begun weeks ago, the emotional intimacy that had blossomed from an accidental entrance into a room, from shared moments of understanding, from laughter, empathy, and the subtle recognition of hearts quietly drawn to one another. And as they finally prepared to sleep, the day's events lingering in their minds, both Clara and Tom felt a profound sense of connection. A mixture of excitement, tenderness, hope, and anticipation, knowing that this journey of emotions was far from over, that the bond they had nurtured was real, meaningful, and capable of deepening further. And as the lights dimmed, the house quieted, and the stars shimmered outside, they carried the warmth of this emotional closeness into their dreams, hearts quietly beating with the thrill of discovery, the joy of connection, and the tender, evolving promise of love and understanding that had begun in the most unexpected of ways, a journey of hearts entwined in a slow, gentle, and profoundly human embrace of feelings, trust, and shared intimacy that would continue to grow, evolve, and enrich their lives in ways neither Clara nor Tom could have imagined at the start, but both now cherished with quiet reverence and anticipation.